Welcome back, everybody. Today, I've got my Stamina Templar build for you guys. This is my favorite build to play in the game, and I've been playing it for a very long time. So, of course, after taking such a long break from ESO, this is the first build that I wanted to play coming back. This is Ghost. It's got high burst damage. It's a very fast build. And thanks to those new hybridization changes, Ghost finally has the one thing that it always lacked: good healing power. Being able to use the Magicka kit on the Stamina Templar has completely changed this build for me. It actually feels so much stronger than it has for a very long time. So I hope you guys enjoy this build video. I hope you guys enjoy the gameplay. There's a bunch at the end of the build video if you want to watch that. And of course, if you want to find a written guide to this build video, you can find it on my website, kristofereso.com. There's a link down below for you guys, and without further ado, let's take a look at that build. Starting off with the race, I am a Wood Elf on the Templar. Wood Elf I think is the best race choice because this is a very movement heavy build. Orc is also a good choice because you do get the 10% movement speed while sprinting, but Wood Elf you get universally that 5% movement speed increase, including in your mist form, which is a very important part of. In general, any race could work though, especially with the hybrid changes. You've got a lot of different options for the race you want to pick. Now, taking a look at the max stat, 14k Magicka, 28k health, and 22k stamina. Nothing super crazy in the max stat department. I'm not running any Hacky Joes. I think I only have a single Hacky Joe on, so I am missing out on about 2k maximum Magicka because that's the off stat that I'll gain by having the tri-stat glyphs. 28k health I think is a must-have for PvP. This build has a whopping 3.5k critical resistance, so a lot of your durability is going to come from that bigger health pool and the resistance to crits themselves. And then finally, 22k max stam for the very high weapon spell damage that this build has. This is definitely appropriate. And taking a look at the recovery side of things, when I buff up with the potion and of course the great sword on top of it, you can see I've got 1100 Magicka recovery, 366 health, and 2290 stamina recovery. Now I am running the Torque of Tonal Constancy on this build. And here you can see the buffed up regens with the Torque on, 1600 Magicka recovery, and just over 3k stamina recovery. Now you're not going to have those values up all the time, but due to the smaller resource pools that this build has, you get a lot of use out of the Torque on it. This build actually stacks spell damage, and that's because Templar actually gets the minor spell damage buff. Let's take a look at the weapon damage, fully buffed here. I am going to pop a Dawn's Wrath skill that I wouldn't normally use, just to show you guys how far we can get. 6,000 spell damage on this build just with these buffs here, and that is not including the 800 or so base spell damage that we'll get from the Master Bow with the infused glyph on top of it. So this build is easily pushing over 7k spell damage, and that is perfect because this build also has a lot of spell penetration and physical penetration, which is going to be a huge deal for dealing damage, but that high base spell damage value is really nice for not only the damage, but the incoming healing of the build too. Now, when I buff up with my potion to get the critical buff, you can see we've got 36% weapon crit, 24% spell crit on the front bar, and then the back bar we go up by about 4% crit, or 3% crit, sorry, in each department. So not a crazy amount of crit chance on this build. That being said, critical chance has been really heavily nerfed over the past couple years, and Templar doesn't natively come by much to increase their critical chance outside of the major buffs. So yeah, this build I think definitely benefits a lot more from stacking the spell damage versus trying to set up a really high critical damage setup. And then let's talk about the penetration on this build. Here you can see we've got just shy of 12k spell and physical penetration, and when I swap my skill that I was supposed to have back on the back bar here, we've got Power of the Light for the minor breach debuff, which can also be applied by our martial attacks, but I do like Power of the Light because it will consistently apply that debuff. And last but not least, I am running a 5-piece Night Mother on both bars, just in the gear here, and that's going to be access to the major breach buff. So in total, this build is sitting at just shy of 21k physical and spell penetration on the front bar, which is awesome for PvP. I mean, you could stack more penetration on a build for damage for sure, but for the high spell damage value that this guy has, I think that the 21k pen fits really well with it. And then let's take a look at the resistances of the build. They are nothing too crazy. You can see 1800 spell resist, 1700 physical resistance, Yeah, I didn't even put the champion point stars in there for the armor values, and I'll talk a little bit about that when we get to the champion points. But we've got 3,573 critical resistance, which is a massive amount of critical damage reduction. This means that if your opponent is not invested into a critical build, their crits will likely not deal any additional damage to you. So really good value to have for PvP. Fun fact, procs can crit now, which they couldn't when I left, and that's another win for the critical damage reduction as a defensive stat. Now let's take a look at the buffs that I have here. Of course, I've got the Lover Mundus for that additional penetration. Definitely the way to go for outgoing damage. Or Zorga's Smoked Bear Haunch, the most expensive and premium food that you can get, but it is definitely worth the price. It gives you max health and all 3 of your recoveries. You can always go with the Jewels of Misrule if you want a cheaper alternative, but the Bear Haunch is definitely the superior food here. And I am a Stage 2 Vampire for that 300 additional weapon and spell damage when we pop out of Mist form. And of course, for the consumables on this build, you definitely want to run the best potion that you can. You have a few options with this build. You need the stamina recovery, you need the max stam, and you need the major savagery from the potion. So you could run the combination of those two plus something like immune to knockback, or you could run a combination of those two plus something like the additional health when you use the potion. Both are pretty good options. I think that the immune to knockback is probably the better option, but it's definitely more on the expensive side versus this generic essence of weapon crit. And of course, if all comes to fail, you can always just use the generic Alliance War Droughts, and that will get you by just fine. Now let's take a look at the gear on this build, starting off with the weapons here. The Master Bow on the back bar, we talked a little bit about this, infused with the weapon spell damage enchant. A huge amount of additional damage will come from landing this attack with your Master Bow. Just put the poison injection in, 800 base spell damage, really nice. And then taking a look at the front bar, I've got the Rallying Cry Maul sharpened with the shock damage enchant. Definitely the way to go for outgoing damage, the Maul sharpened. Shock damage here for that chance to apply the additional minor vulnerability and just the upfront damage of the shock glyph. Taking a look at the jewelry, they are a mix of infused with Swift on the torque here, and then I've got spell damage on everything. Now the distribution of infused and Swift is kind of up to the user. I'm actually running a little bit less Swift than I would normally here. You could run all 3 as Swift, and you'll still have great damage and healing on the build. The mobility is definitely worth it, so I would recommend running at minimum at least 1 Swift with a build like this. And then, of course, the Torque of Tonal Constancy. We talked a little bit about this. This is going to provide the build with excellent sustain once we start burning into our resource pools. And then the Rallying Cry set, which is actually finished by this last shoulder piece up here. The Rallying Cry set is great for 2 reasons. Number 1, 300 weapon and spell damage. That applies to both bars. Then finally, that 1600 critical resistance. Wow, that is so much additional crit resist to be added from a set that also gives you 300 weapon and spell damage. Really, really good PvP set all around. Of course, this set becomes less effective if you're playing in a group, but luckily I always play solo, so I'm going to be able to use this set at its full power. And if that's not enough, it has a 20-second duration with a 15-second cooldown, so consistently you should have this buff up the entire time that you're in a fight, especially on a build like this with so many different sources of healing. And then for the next set here, we've got the Jack of the Night Mother, and this is going to be these 5 pieces of gear here. And yeah, Night Mother's Gaze giving additional crit chance, additional weapon damage, and that big one, that Major Breach for the additional damage on all of our abilities. And then finally, last but not least, I've got the Magma Incarnate's Mask for just the 1-piece Magicka Stamina Recovery. I mean, it's like a little Amber Plasm set. You can't go wrong with this. Such a good 1-piece, arguably one of the best 1-pieces in the game. I would even compare something like this to almost being as good as some of the mythic items. So yeah, really, really good stuff. And then for the gear, everything is well fitted. You definitely want full well fitted for this build. You're going to be rolling a lot on a build like this. It is its primary defense is that roll dodge and of course sprint to help break distance. And we get a ton of critical resistance just from the other aspects of the build, so we don't need to have any impenetrable here. And then for the glyphs on this guy, ideally you want to go with the tri-stat glyphs to give all 3 stats, and then just even out your stats so you have about 28k HP and whatever magicka and stamina you'll have after that. But, you know, I didn't spend the money on that, so I just have the regular stamina glyphs here. This is just fine if you want to go this route. You're just going to have a little bit less maximum magicka than if you run the tri-stat glyphs. And let's take a look at the skills I'm running on this build. So pretty similar to old iterations of Ghost, but with a nice new twist that I'm really enjoying with the hybridization of everything in the new patches. Let's start off with the first skill here. We got Executioner. This is the primary finisher for the build. Basically, anyone below 50% is going to get clubbed pretty hard by this, and yeah, that's what we use it for. The next ability I have is Critical Rush. This is, in a way, your primary spammable, but it's mostly there because it is a hard-hitting gap closer that will crit every single time, and it increases in damage based on the distance from your target. So you can use this to very quickly get on top of someone and apply a ton of pressure to them. And then the next ability I have here, which is a big change from the old kit, Honor the Dead. Now I'm going to buff up so you guys can see the Honor the Dead tooltip here. Of course I am going to be missing that minor sorcery buff, so we're not fully buffed on it, but you can see a 16k tooltip in PvP. That's going to be a pretty reliable 8 to 10k heal depending on how low your health is. And when Honor the Dead crits on a build like this, well, you can expect a 12 to 15k heal crit. Again, depending on how low your health is. So a really, really powerful heal for this build. And one of the things that makes Honor the Dead so good for a build like Ghost is that it is a powerful burst heal. And if you use it once every now and then, you get a majority of the cost back after you use it. So this ends up being a very non-intensive Magicka skill as long as you're not just spamming Honor the Dead. So if you lead with the Honor the Dead heal and you find it does not heal your health enough, then you want to follow it up, of course, with the Rally for the additional burst heal from this. Rally, of course, is going to give that major brutality buff on top of it. The minor endurance buff for the stamina recovery. We are running a ton of medium armor, so that is such an important buff to have. And then finally, of course, that burst heal. And then next up, we've got Binding Javelin, ignoring the enemy's resistances. We got a lot of penetration, so that's not the most important part of this skill, but that stun that it provides, especially being a ranged stun and being an Adric Spear skill to give us 10% additional critical damage on the front bar. Really nice stuff. And then for the ultimate on the front bar, I've gone with Dawnbreaker of Smiting. You could choose any ultimate you want. This build has the full stun kit that it needs, so you could even run the Crescent Sweep, or even something like Onslaught. But I went with Dawnbreaker of Smiting because of that big AoE smack and the fact that it stuns everything that's been hit and then applies a very powerful damage over time afterwards. The combination of the high damage with the stun is very, very good for PvP. And then taking a look at the bow bar here, the first ability I have is Poison Injection. Very important skill for this build, not only to apply a bit of additional pressure and put that dot on, but this will proc the Master Bow. You could go for the other morph of Poison Injection here, but seeing as Ghost is a burst build and we do have a ranged stun in the Binding Javelin, getting the interrupt from the other morph isn't super necessary, and I do prefer Poison Injection for trying to close that combo on a very low health opponent. The additional ticks can make a difference and help you get that kill. And then the next skill I have here is Power of the Light. I know I'm playing a spell damage build, and you guys are going to be like, why are you running Power of the Light, not Purifying Light? Well, it's because Power of the Light is actually still, I think, the better option for this build. As you can see, when I buff up, the tooltip on Power of the Light will come up to about 8k. That's pretty comparable to the Dawnbreaker. On the game right now, the Power of the Light tooltip seems to be scaling with Battle Spirit while you're in PvP. So this will not be halved. This will deal that 7 to 8k damage to the target when the Power of the Light goes off. And it can crit. So realistically with this build, you could see 10k Power of the Light crit still 100%. If you compare the tooltip damage of the Power of the Light versus the other morph, which will scale off of spell damage, it's only actually a little bit higher, and Power of the Light will consistently apply the Minor Breach. And then the last reason why I'm actually running Power of the Light here is because this is a stamina build for the most part. If we run the other morph, we have to go a little bit heavier into the Magicka Sustain, which would require changing up some of the glyphs and losing a little bit of spell damage that this build has. So yeah, for the sake of sustain, Power of the Light just made more sense for me too. And then finally, I've got Elusive Mist, and this is one of your primary mobility skills, reducing an insane amount of damage when you enter Mist form, but of course it cuts off all of your healing and your stat recoveries. I went with Elusive for the expedition that you get from it. We do have a lot of major expedition from the bow dodge rolls, so you could go for the Blood Mist here instead to just kind of drain health while you're in Mist form, but for the sake of Ghost being a mobility build, I do think that Elusive Mist is the better option, because oftentimes you don't want to sit next to somebody in Mist. Instead, you want to try to break distance and then reset with a combo at a distance. And then the next ability here is Extended Ritual. that very powerful Templar Purge, removing 5 harmful negative effects and putting down that big AoE field that heals you. Of course, an ally can synergize it to purge the effects off themselves too. But a big plus with the changes to hybridization, this heal is a lot stronger for a Stamina Templar than it used to be. So an actually pretty good source of healing over time if you're standing in your circle. And then when you pair that with the Restoring Focus circle, all of a sudden you've got some pretty nice healing over time in the circles. Of course, Restoring Focus also gives the major armor buff and that 240 stamina every 1 second, the equivalent of about 480 stamina recovery. And then for the ultimate on the back bar, I've gone with Temporal Guard. The ultimate's kind of up to the user what you want to use. I really like Temporal Guard because it can save you from a really bad situation and allow you to escape a very large group of opponents. And I get the minor protection on the back bar here, which is going to make the Mist form even more durable. So nice in that regard. Up to you if you want to run something like the Vampire ult or even the other morph of Temporal Guard. Now let's start off with the champion points on this build. Starting off in the blue tree, I've put all the applicable passives that I could in. Depending on how many CP you have, you definitely want to fill in all of the passive stars that you can. The only really unimportant one being the Flawless Ritual, which will increase the chance to apply a magical status effect. The only magical status effect we have is the Shock Glyph. But for the important stars here, the first one I have is Deadly Aim for the 10% single target damage increase. Everything except our ultimate is single target, so very important. Then I've got Master at Arms, increase your damage with direct damage attacks by 2% per stage, which is, again, all of our attacks outside of the damage over time from the poison injection. And then I've got Resilience for the 660 additional critical resistance. And last but not least, I went with Ironclad for a 10% damage reduction to enemy incoming direct damage attacks, which is a lot of incoming burst. Templar has a great counter to things like dots through something like Purge, so our biggest weakness is going to be that incoming direct damage. An interesting blue tree for me here, definitely going for, I think, the best offensive options that I could, mixed with the most powerful defensive options that I could too. And then taking a look at the red tree, again, you want to put in all your applicable passives that you can. Really important to make sure you at least put the point cost into reducing the roll, and of course reducing the cost of break free and sprint. But the red jump point stars here, the first one is the Boundless Vitality for 1,400 additional max health, great for PvP. And then we get the 90 of each recovery from Rejuvenation. And then I've got Survival Instincts for a 25% cost reduction while under the effect of a status effect. You are almost always under a negative status effect while in PvP, so this will be a very big deal for the sustain to things like block, roll, and break free. Should hopefully help a lot with the stam sustain on this build. And then last but not least, we've got Celerity for the 10% additional movement speed bonus. This is a mobility build, so you cannot go wrong with that. And something worth mentioning, of course, is the Breakfall passive in the green tree here to reduce the amount of fall damage that you take. Wood Elf already natively gets some reduced fall damage, so yeah, this stacks really nicely with that too. And as a mobility build, you can expect to fly off of things every now and then. And there you go, guys. That is the build. Alright guys, let's get into that PvP commentary. For the first fight here, I've got actually a little bit of fighting outside an enemy yellow Zerg, and I wanted to show some footage of this with Ghost because there's a lot of fights like this in Cyrodiil, and these kind of large-scale fights really push defensively Ghost to its limit, so you get to see a lot of how movement is a very important part of survival on this build. So jumping right into it, you can see I'm just throwing down Power the Lights, poison injections on people, seeing if I can find an appropriate target. I see the incoming attack from behind there, here comes the meteor, and then right into Mist form to absorb the meteor, not get stunned by it as well, and then just jump back behind the bit of rock here, reset my buffs, and then charge right back out. I throw the Power the Light poison injection on the first player there. I go for the kind of half-charge bow heavy into the javelin, but I end up not committing to that combo. Probably a good call. A lot of yellow players just converged in that location, and I just kind of sit back behind the rocks here, look for another target to kind of work on here. I put some Power the Light poison injection on the guy at the top, hit him with the crit rush, and try to go for a combo on him. Unfortunately, I slide off the edge right away, but it ends up working out because I get back behind the other side here, and this guy does not see me coming, and I quickly dot him up, hit him with the Dawnbreaker, and the execute to finish him off, and now the players kind of converge and attack me in this position. I go for a couple dodges through these guys, forcing them to turn around, and then just right away kite back into the safer spot behind the rocks. and just try to find another target that I can hit here. Running the torque, of course, I have the option of kind of burning my Magicka here, but the potion is up, so I actually get a lot of sustain back from that. A lot of damage after eating that stun there, and a huge crit on Honor the Dead. On this build, you definitely want to use Honor the Dead as your primary heal as often as possible, especially on a build like this when we can follow up that Honor the Dead with something like Rally. It just allows us to have a very low Magicka consumption rate on the Honor of the Dead throughout the fight. And here you can see right away as I pop my head out, they start throwing stuns down, just hug into Mist Form to prevent myself from getting hit, and then get back into kind of a more safe position. But of course, we got to try to find somebody that I can put some damage into here. I go for this Nightblade, actually. Hit him with the stun on the Javelin. There's the Dawnbreaker, and I end up misting away just for safety, and there's Power of the Light coming in strong, finishing him off. And unfortunately, when I get back around the other corner here, the other player had just gone down, and I end up diving into a very dangerous spot and go down right away. Now, moving on to our next clip here. It's the fight from the intro, oh yeah, but we're going to show the entire course of this fight here. It's a lot longer than just that minute at the intro there. And it starts with me just kind of riding into the back of the enemy group here. One player ends up following me around the corner, splitting from the group, set him up with that Poison Injection, Power of the Light, and then finish him off with a quick Javelin into the Executioner. Get a nice combo on this guy right away, the Dawnbreaker into the Execute, and the next player comes charging over the bridge, just dot him up, hit him with the Javelin, go into the heavy attack, and try to land that Execute. Unfortunately, I just end up missing big time, just not having him over my target there, and I managed to get him on the next Power of the Light explosion. There's the Javelin combo coming in, pretty well timed, I think, with the explosion there. And now it's just me and the enemy Dragon Knight. He throws down all of his damage over time. Get him with a nice Dawnbreaker and feed him a couple Executioners. Power of the Light goes off as well. And just like that, managed to kill a few players on the bridge. The enemy Templar comes over the bridge here. Unfortunately, he gets the res right before I can stun him. He even has time to throw a Javelin at me, and he goes right away for the other body. I instinctively went to guard that first body, completely forgot about this guy down here. And he goes to this body now to try to pick him up. I'm going to stop him from getting that third res. And now I've got the fight all over again. And the enemy Templar comes around the corner, hit him with a big Dawnbreaker there, and get him with an Executioner. Unfortunately, I didn't have the Power of the Light Poison Injection. Oh, if only we had it, that might have been able to take him down. But we did kind of catch him off guard with that kind of surprise Dawnbreaker. And I throw Power of the Light Poison Injection on the next player there as he begins to retreat across the bridge. The enemy Templars lobbing some heavy attacks. The other, actually, first Templar from the fight is lobbing heavy attacks at me with the staff. A nice explosion there on the Power of the Light, and both Templars throwing Honor the Deads or Breath of Lifes on each other, and unfortunately, I'm not able to DPS through that. I'm just going to have to get a good combo on them and burst them each down. And I just actually switched targets a little bit here too. I decided to go for the higher ranked Templar because we can catch him off guard if he's sleeping, and there's a huge combo on him. He does a great job at the end preventing the KO, and the Nightblade out of stealth here. I take quite a bit of pressure. There you see the Stambar gets burnt real good, and Honor the Dead coming in so good. So much healing power from it. And I didn't hear the meteor there, so I end up just eating that. A lot of damage in the stun. That's okay though. Honor the Dead coming in clutch again. So much burst healing power, just allows you to super quickly reset with Ghost, and then the Torque just pumping all my resources back right away. And this enemy Nightblade re-engages with his mechanical acuity set, it looks like. And after not getting the gank he wanted there, he ends up running up the road and stealthing away. And that's not going to be the end of the fight yet either. I'm going to chase these next two players down that are trying to escape towards wherever they're going with this scroll here. I end up finding the 5-star Templar, throw the Power of the Light Poison Injection. There's the crit rush in, and he dodges forward, ends up getting a good dodge there. The Power of the Light might have been the KO if he'd not dodged that combo. And I end up just kind of using the hill, the little bit of height there, just to line of sight some attacks. Throw the Power of the Light Poison Injection on the other Templar. He is much squishier. He has way less hit points than the 5-star Templar. But this combo that we're using can kill both of these guys if we catch them. So I'm just going to try to go for either one in this fight, focusing on the squishier player initially. But Here you can see that the 5-star player is very quick to throw the heals down, so it's actually kind of tricky to kill him because he's getting so much healing. I put the Power of the Light Poison Injection on the other player. Go for the Crit Rush Javelin combo there. Again, good damage into him. His Earthcore set, I believe, coming in with a lot of healing there, and I eat the Javelin and the Meteor, but there you see right away as I pop out a Mist form, the rally actually ends up going off. Refresh my rally, throw my buffs down, and try to redot up the enemy Templar. And I come back around the corner, throw another Poison Injection down. There's a good combo with the heavy attack into the Dawnbreaker. His health dropping super low, and he ends up again just dodging at the last moment on that little bit of HP, and I can't really pursue it because the other Templar's throwing a lot of stuns on me. I switch right away back to the lower level Templar here, and he ends up just putting some pressure on me with the other guy. I'm forced again to retreat, reset my buffs, and then pop right back out of that corner. I love the speed on Ghost. We can just use this terrain so well. I'll let you guys enjoy the last little bit of this fight as I say goodbye. It has been so much fun to be back on Ghost. This is such a fun build to play, and I know that in my time playing ESO, I'm probably going to jump on this pretty regularly, so look forward to possibly more Ghost videos in the future. That being said, right now on my list, Stamina Nightblade. I'm going to build it, probably have built it by the time you guys see this video, and hopefully you get to see it on stream if you want to catch some of that. Thank you guys for tuning in again. If you want to catch that live stream, you can always follow me on Twitch. Give me a follow on Twitter to keep up to date with me. And of course, check out my website, KristoferESO.com. It's got a written guide to this build as well as written guides to all of my other builds. If you guys want to see another top 5 from me, well, you got to send me those clips. You can send them to KristoferESO@hotmail.com. This show is sponsored by What the Fast, a VPN for gamers that can give you better ping to your favorite games, free to try for the first month. There's a link down below for you guys. And last but not least, a massive thank you to all of my patrons on Patreon. Thank you for supporting the show. Thank you everybody just for tuning in and watching. Look forward to some Nightblade in the future. As always, I hope you guys enjoyed. Have a great night, everybody, and I'll see you next time.